conference room on the 42nd floor smelled like expensive leather and betrayal. I sat across from my husband of 7 years, watching him sign papers with the same gold pen I'd given him for our anniversary. His lawyer, a woman in a steel grey suit, slid another document toward me. The morning sun streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows made everything look clean and civilized, which was ironic considering what was about to happen. "Mrs. Patterson, if you'd just initial here," the lawyer said, her manicured finger tapping a highlighted line. "And here, and sign at the bottom." I picked up my own pen, black, practical, purchased at a drugstore, and read every single word. My profession as a contracts analyst for a pharmaceutical company meant I knew exactly what I was looking at. More importantly, I knew what I was looking for. "This clause," I said, pointing to section 7.3. "It states I forfeit all claim to marital assets if the marriage is deemed invalid due to fraud or misrepresentation." "Standard language," the lawyer said smoothly. "Interesting choice of words." I set down my pen. "Especially since I'm not the one who committed fraud." My husband James finally looked at me. Really looked at me. His blue eyes, the ones I'd once found captivating, held nothing but impatience. "Vivian, don't make this harder than it needs to be." "Harder than it needs to be," I repeated softly. "James, you filed for annulment claiming I deceived you about my ability to have children. You're arguing our entire marriage was based on a lie I told you." "You said you wanted kids," he shot back. "We tried for 5 years. 5 years, Vivian. Then Dr. Morrison told me the truth, that you've known since before we got married that you couldn't conceive naturally." The accusation hung in the air like smoke. His lawyer watched me carefully, probably expecting tears or protests. James leaned back in his chair with that expression I'd come to recognize over the past 6 months, the look of a man who believed he'd already won. I placed my purse on the table and pulled out a manila folder. Not a dramatic gesture, nothing theatrical, just a simple folder, the kind you could buy in bulk at any office supply store. "Before I sign anything," I said, "I think you should see this." James glanced at his lawyer, who nodded slightly. He opened the folder. Inside were 3 items: a photograph, a medical report, and a bank statement. The photograph showed James and his assistant, Madison, at a restaurant in Portland. Nothing scandalous, just 2 people having dinner. The date stamp read February 14th, Valentine's Day. The same day, James had texted me that he was stuck in a conference that ran late. "So I had dinner with my assistant," James said, but his voice had changed. Tighter, careful. "We were discussing the Henderson account." "Keep looking," I said. "Before we deeper into the story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories." The medical report was next. Dr. Morrison's letterhead, official and pristine. But this wasn't the report James had received. This was the original, the one from 3 months before James filed for annulment. The one that clearly stated, "Patient shows normal ovarian reserve and uterine function. Fertility within normal parameters for age. Recommend couples counseling before pursuing assisted reproductive options, as psychological factors may be contributing to conception difficulties." James's face went pale. "Where did you get this?" "From Dr. Morrison's office," I said calmly. "The actual report, not the modified version someone requested 2 weeks before you filed for annulment." His lawyer leaned forward, examining the document. "Mrs. Patterson, are you suggesting—" "I'm not suggesting anything," I interrupted. "I'm stating facts. That's the original medical assessment. I have the digital records as well, with timestamps and metadata. I also have emails between Dr. Morrison's office administrator and an unidentified party requesting changes to patient records. The IP address traces back to Patterson Industries. Your company, James." The lawyer's expression shifted from confident to concerned. She began writing notes, fast. James stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the polished floor. "This is ridiculous. You're making things up because you can't accept—" "The bank statement," I said, not raising my voice. "Look at the bank statement." He didn't want to. I could see it in the way his hand hesitated over the paper. But his lawyer had already picked it up, and her sharp intake of breath told me she understood what she was seeing. "This shows a transfer of $50,000, she said slowly, from Patterson Industries to an LLC called Clearwater Holdings, dated 3 weeks before the annulment filing." "I have no idea what that is," James said, but he was sweating now. Actually sweating, in his $1,000 suit, in his own lawyer's conference room. I opened my purse again and took out my phone. Clearwater Holdings is owned by Dr. Morrison's office administrator, Linda Chen. The same Linda Chen who modified my medical records. The same Linda Chen who received $50,000. "Would you like to hear the recording of your phone conversation with her, or should we save that for court?" The silence that followed was profound. Outside, Seattle continued its morning routine. Cars honking, people rushing to work, the ferry crossing Elliott Bay. Inside this room, a marriage was ending, but not the way James had planned. His lawyer closed her notebook. "Mr. Patterson, I need to speak with you privately." "No," I said firmly. "We're not done." "Madison." James flinched at her name. "Your assistant Madison," I continued, "is 8 weeks pregnant. Congratulations, by the way. I found out last Thursday when I ran into her at the pharmacy. She was buying prenatal vitamins and looking absolutely terrified when she saw me. We had quite a conversation in the parking lot." "You're lying," James said, but his voice cracked. "I'm really not." "She's scared, James. Scared because you told her you'd leave me, marry her, start fresh, but you needed to leave me without losing half your assets. So you concocted this scheme. Pay someone to falsify my medical records, claim I defrauded you into marriage, use the prenup clause about misrepresentation to walk away with everything." I stood up, gathering my folder. Madison told me everything. She thought I was going to attack her or cause a scene. Instead, I bought her a coffee and listened. She's 24 years old, and she actually believed you loved her. The lawyer was already closing her briefcase. "Mr. Patterson, I'm formally withdrawing as your counsel, effective immediately." "Wait," James said, his composure cracking completely. "You can't just—" "I absolutely can when my client has potentially committed fraud and conspiracy. Mrs. Patterson, you'll be hearing from someone at our firm who can discuss representing you in the divorce proceedings." She nodded at me, professional to the end, and walked out. James and I stood alone in the conference room. 7 years of marriage, of shared dinners and mortgage payments, and arguments about whose turn it was to take out the recycling. 7 years that he'd tried to erase with falsified documents and a younger woman's trust. "How long have you known?" he finally asked. "About Madison, 4 months. About the medical record scheme, 6 weeks. About you being exactly the kind of man who would do something like this." I picked up my purse. "Probably since year 3, if I'm honest with myself." "So you've just been waiting, gathering evidence, planning this?" "I'm a contracts analyst, James. I read the fine print for a living. You really should have remembered that before you decided to forge medical documents and commit wire fraud." I walked toward the door, then paused. "Oh, and the State Medical Board will be receiving copies of everything tomorrow morning. Dr. Morrison might want to lawyer up too." I left him standing there, surrounded by unsigned papers and the wreckage of his carefully constructed plan. The elevator ride down 42 floors felt longer than 7 years of marriage. My phone buzzed as I reached the lobby. A text from my best friend Rachel. "How'd it go?" I typed back, "Better than expected. Meet me at the usual place." Her response came immediately. "Already there. Ordered your coffee." The coffee shop was 3 blocks away, tucked between a bookstore and a vintage clothing boutique. Rachel had claimed our regular table by the window, 2 cups already waiting. She took one look at my face and smiled. You did it, she said. I presented evidence of fraud, conspiracy, and falsification of medical records, I corrected, sitting down. Whether that counts as doing it remains to be seen. Rachel had been my roommate in college, my maid of honor at the wedding, and the first person I'd called when I found the receipt for Madison's birthday present in James's coat pocket. Not because I was shocked, I'd suspected something for months, but because I needed someone who would help me think clearly instead of emotionally. Walk me through what happened, she said, pulling out a notebook. Rachel was a journalist for the Seattle Tribune, and her investigative instincts had been invaluable over the past few months. I told her everything, from the modified medical reports to Madison's confession in the pharmacy parking lot. Rachel took notes, occasionally asking questions, her expression growing more satisfied with each detail. This is actually insane, she said when I finished. He really thought he could forge medical documents and get away with it. Men like James always think they'll get away with it. He's been the golden boy his entire life, athletic scholarship to USC, built his company from nothing, featured in Forbes before he turned 35. He's used to winning. Used to, Rachel repeated, grinning. Past tense, I love it. My coffee had gone lukewarm while I talked, but I drank it anyway. The caffeine hit my system, sharp and necessary. I need to prepare for what comes next. He's not going to take this quietly. What can he do? You have evidence of fraud. His own lawyer quit. He can make noise, claim I'm vindictive, that I've twisted facts, that I'm trying to destroy him out of spite. He has money and connections. He can hire a better lawyer, someone without ethical boundaries. Rachel's smile faded. You're right. He's going to fight dirty. He already has been fighting dirty. I'm just fighting smarter. I pulled out my phone and showed her a document I'd been working on. I've compiled everything. Emails, bank transfers, phone records, the original medical reports, Madison's statement. I've also documented every business dinner that was actually a date, every late night at the office that ended at Madison's apartment, every lie about conferences that were really weekend getaways. How did you get all this? James put me on all his accounts years ago. Emergency access, he said, joint credit cards, shared cloud storage for photos. He never bothered to remove my access when he started cheating because he didn't think I'd ever look. I scrolled through months of evidence. He underestimated me. They always do. Rachel leaned back, studying me. You've changed. I mean that as a compliment. When you first found out about Madison, you were devastated. Now you're, I don't know, colder, more calculated. Not colder, I said, clearer. The devastation was real, but it was also clouding my judgment. Once I got past the emotion, I could see the situation for what it really was. James didn't just cheat on me. He systematically planned to destroy my reputation and steal my financial security. That's not a mistake or a moment of weakness. That's malicious. So what's next? I file for divorce. Traditional grounds, adultery, fraud, breach of marital contract. I submit all the evidence to the court. I request full forensic accounting of Patterson Industries because I'm betting this isn't the first time he's used company money for personal schemes. And I wait. Wait for what? For him to make a mistake. He's angry right now, humiliated. Angry men make mistakes. Rachel's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and her eyebrows shot up. Speaking of mistakes, you need to see this. She turned her phone toward me. It was a post on a local business forum, posted 20 minutes ago under James's verified account. Reminder that bitter spouses will do anything to destroy successful entrepreneurs. False accusations are the weapon of the desperate. Truth always prevails. Stay strong. Ash, fake news. I felt my jaw tighten. He posted that? He actually posted that? Oh, it gets better. Rachel scrolled down to the comments. His mother already chimed in with support. So did 3 of his business partners. They're all talking about how hard it is for successful men, how women weaponize the legal system, the usual garbage. James's mother, Patricia, had never liked me. I was too independent, too focused on my career, not interested enough in hosting dinner parties or joining the country club committee. She'd made it clear from the beginning that I wasn't her choice for James, though she'd hidden it behind polite smiles and backhanded compliments about my practical wedding dress and charming start to home. Screenshot everything, I told Rachel, especially Patricia's comments. If this goes to trial, I want the jury to see what I've been dealing with. Already done. I'm also documenting everyone who likes or shares his post. This is evidence of a coordinated campaign to discredit you. My phone rang. Unknown number. I considered letting it go to voicemail, then decided against it. Hello? Mrs. Patterson, this is Detective Sarah Brennan with the Seattle Police Department, White Collar Crimes Division. I'd like to speak with you about a complaint filed this morning regarding financial fraud and falsification of medical records. I felt my heart rate pick up. I'd be happy to speak with you. Should I come to the station? Actually, I'm calling because we've already begun a preliminary investigation based on documents provided to us by Dr. Morrison's office. His administrator, Linda Chen, came forward this morning with information about payments she received to alter patient records. Your name came up. I wanted to reach out before this becomes more complicated. I have additional documentation that might be helpful to your investigation, I said carefully, including bank records and recorded conversations. I'd very much like to see those. Can you come in this afternoon, say 3 o'clock? I'll be there. After I hung up, Rachel was staring at me. The police are investigating. Already? Linda Chen turned herself in, I said, trying to process this new information. She must have realized she was going to get caught and decided to cooperate. That's huge. If she's cooperating, she'll tell them everything. About James, about the money, all of it. I stood up, leaving my cold coffee on the table. I need to get organized. The detective wants to see me at 3. I'm coming with you. Rachel, you don't have to. I'm coming. You need a witness for everything from now on. James is going to spin this somehow, and I'm not letting you walk into anything alone. We spent the next 3 hours at my apartment, a 1-bedroom place I'd rented 2 months ago when I first started gathering evidence. James didn't even know I had it. As far as he was concerned, I was still living in our house, still sleeping in the guest room, still playing the role of the dutiful wife trying to make things work. The apartment was sparse. A laptop, a printer, a filing cabinet full of documents, and a futon I'd bought from a college student on Craigslist. It looked like a private investigator's office, which was essentially what it had become. Rachel helped me organize everything into clear categories: financial fraud, medical fraud, evidence of adultery, business misconduct. We made copies of everything, stored digital backups in multiple locations, and prepared a summary document explaining how all the pieces connected. This is actually bulletproof, Rachel said, reviewing our work. There's no way he talks his way out of this. He'll try. Rich men always try. At 2:30, we drove to the police station in Rachel's car. My hands were steady on my lap, but my mind was racing through scenarios. What if the detective didn't believe me? What if James had already gotten to them somehow, spun some story that made me look unstable or vindictive? But when we walked into Detective Brennan's office, those fears evaporated. She was a woman in her 50s, with grey hair pulled back in a practical bun and eyes that looked like they'd seen every possible human behavior and weren't impressed by any of it. Mrs. Patterson, she said, shaking my hand firmly. Thank you for coming in. And you are? Rachel Foster, Seattle Tribune. I'm here as Mrs. Patterson's friend, not as press. Detective Brennan nodded and gestured for us to sit. Let me be direct with you. Linda Chen provided us with detailed information about a scheme to falsify medical records. She claims your husband, James Patterson, paid her $50,000 to alter your fertility reports to make it appear you had concealed information about your reproductive health. She says he told her this was necessary for an annulment proceeding, Is that consistent with your understanding? Yes, I said. I have documentation of the payment and recordings of phone conversations between James and Linda discussing the arrangement. I placed the flash drive on her desk. Everything is on here, organized by date and type. Bank transfers, emails, phone records, the original medical reports, and audio files of recorded conversations. Detective Brennan plugged the drive into her computer and began reviewing the files. Her expression never changed, but she made notes steadily. After 20 minutes, she sat back. This is extensive. How long did it take you to compile this? 6 weeks for the bulk of it, though I'd been noticing inconsistencies in James's behavior for about 4 months before that. Noticing inconsistencies, she repeated. You mean you suspected infidelity? I suspected something wasn't right. James was often unavailable, vague about his schedule, defensive when I asked questions. Then I found receipts for expensive gifts I'd never received. I started paying attention. And when did you discover the medical records fraud? 3 weeks ago, I requested copies of my files from Dr. Morrison's office for a second opinion. The administrator, Linda, seemed nervous when I asked. She printed the reports, but kept glancing at her computer screen like she was worried about something. I noticed the dates didn't match. The version she printed was dated differently than the version James's lawyer had submitted for the annulment. That's when I knew something had been altered. Detective Brennan made more notes. And you recorded conversations with your husband? I did. Washington is a 2-party consent state, so I informed James I was recording. He didn't pay attention because he was in the middle of an argument, but the notification is on the recordings. I was careful to stay within legal boundaries. Smart. The detective looked at Rachel. And you've been helping with this investigation. As a friend, Rachel clarified, though I am considering writing about it once the legal proceedings are concluded. This seems like something the public should know about. Powerful men using money to falsify medical records and manipulate the legal system. It is, Detective Brennan agreed. Mrs. Patterson, I'm going to be honest with you. What your husband did is serious. Medical records fraud, wire fraud, potentially conspiracy. But prosecuting wealthy individuals is complicated. They have resources, good lawyers. They can drag cases out for years. I understand. However, she continued, Linda Chen's cooperation changes things. She's willing to testify. With her testimony and your documentation, we have a strong case. I'm recommending charges be filed against James Patterson and potentially against Dr. Morrison if we find he knew about or facilitated the falsification. My throat felt tight. This was really happening. What happens next? We complete the investigation, probably another 2 weeks. Then it goes to the prosecutor's office. They'll decide whether to file charges. In the meantime, I strongly suggest you hire a good divorce attorney. This is going to get complicated. I have an appointment tomorrow with Eleanor Vance. Detective Brennan smiled for the first time. Good choice. Eleanor doesn't lose. She'll make sure you're protected. We left the station as the afternoon sun was beginning its descent toward the Olympic Mountains. Rachel drove in silence for a few minutes before saying, You know this is going to explode, right? Once charges are filed, this becomes news. James Patterson, tech entrepreneur, charged with fraud. It'll be everywhere. I know. Are you ready for that? For everyone knowing your business? For strangers having opinions about your marriage? I thought about it, really thought about it. The idea of my private pain becoming public spectacle made my stomach turn, but the alternative was worse. The alternative was James walking away clean, marrying Madison, living his life while I was left broke and labeled as the woman who'd lied about being able to have children. I'm ready, I said. Let him face consequences for once in his privileged life. That evening, I met with Eleanor Vance in her downtown office. She was a legend in Seattle legal circles, a divorce attorney who'd built her reputation on representing women whose husbands thought they were untouchable. Her corner office overlooked Puget Sound, and her walls were covered with framed newspaper articles about her cases. "I've reviewed the documents you sent," Eleanor said without preamble. "This is one of the most clear-cut cases of fraud I've seen in 20 years of practice. Your husband is an idiot." I couldn't help smiling. That's encouraging to hear. He left a paper trail a first-year law student could follow. The bank transfers, the modified documents, the public social media posts attacking you. It's almost too easy. She pulled up something on her computer. "I saw his post this afternoon, by the way. The one about false accusations. I've already filed a motion to preserve all his social media accounts as evidence. Every post, every comment, every like. All evidence of his state of mind and his attempts to defame you." Can that actually hurt him in court? Absolutely. It shows consciousness of guilt, attempts to manipulate public opinion, and demonstrates malicious intent. Plus, some of the comments on that post are legally actionable. His mother, for instance, called you a gold digger and a liar. That's defamation. We can sue her separately if we want. The thought of Patricia Patterson being held accountable for her years of subtle cruelty was satisfying. How long will this take? Depends on whether he wants to fight or settle. Given his personality and what you've told me, I'm guessing he'll fight. He sees himself as the victim here. Men like that don't accept responsibility easily. Eleanor leaned forward. But here's what he doesn't understand. Every day this case continues, more information comes out. More people learn what he did. His reputation erodes. His business suffers. Eventually, his board of directors will start asking uncomfortable questions about a CEO under investigation for fraud. I hadn't thought about the business implications. You should. Patterson Industries is publicly traded now, right? As of last year. Yes, they had an IPO in March. Then his legal problems become shareholder concerns. Fraud charges against a CEO can tank a stock price. The board might force him to step down just to protect the company's value. That's leverage we can use. I was beginning to understand why Eleanor never lost. She didn't just think about the legal battle. She thought about every pressure point, every vulnerability, every angle that could be exploited. "I want to move aggressively," Eleanor continued. "File for divorce immediately, request temporary support, file for restraining orders if necessary, and most importantly, request a forensic accounting of all marital assets. I'm betting James has been hiding money for years, and I want to find every penny. Whatever you think is best. I also want to depose Madison, your husband's assistant. If she's pregnant with his child, that's relevant to the case. She may have information about his financial planning, about conversations they've had, about his intentions. She's young and scared. She'll tell us everything." The next 2 weeks moved quickly. Eleanor filed the divorce papers with enough attached documentation to fill a briefcase. James's new lawyer, an aggressive litigator named Robert Keene, with a reputation for scorched earth tactics, tried to block everything, claiming I'd obtained evidence illegally or through invasion of privacy. Judge Andrea Holloway, assigned to our case, reviewed the evidence and denied every motion. Mrs. Patterson had legal access to all shared accounts, Judge Holloway ruled. She was entitled to request her own medical records. She properly notified her husband when recording conversations. There is no invasion of privacy when the plaintiff had legitimate access to the information in question. James tried to freeze our joint accounts, but Eleanor had already moved my portion into a separate account. He tried to claim I'd stolen money, but I had documentation showing I'd only transferred exactly half, my legal share. The story broke in the Seattle Tribune 2 weeks after the divorce filing. Rachel hadn't written it. She'd recused herself due to our friendship, but her colleague, Marcus Chen, had done a thorough investigation. The headline read, "Tech CEO accused of medical fraud to void marriage." The article detailed everything: the falsified records, the payments to Linda Chen, the pregnant assistant, the annulment attempt. It included quotes from legal experts calling James's actions unprecedented and potentially criminal. Within hours, it was picked up by national outlets. Patterson Industries' stock dropped 18% in one day. James's mother, Patricia, gave an interview to a sympathetic lifestyle magazine, portraying her son as the victim of a vengeful wife and a biased media. "James is a good man who made a mistake in judgment," she said. "This witch hunt is destroying a brilliant entrepreneur because his wife can't accept that their marriage failed naturally." Eleanor read the article and smiled. "Perfect. She just defamed you in print. I'll add her to the lawsuit." "We're suing his mother?" "We're suing everyone who defamed you. Patricia, James, anyone who publicly called you a liar or a gold digger or anything else demonstrably false. By the time we're done, they'll all think twice before attacking someone without evidence." Madison agreed to a deposition. She came to Eleanor's office looking terrified, her pregnancy not yet visible but her fear obvious. Eleanor was surprisingly gentle with her, acknowledging that Madison was young and had been manipulated. "Tell me about your relationship with James Patterson," Eleanor began. Madison's story poured out, how James had pursued her, promised her everything, told her I was cold and unloving, that our marriage had been over for years. He'd said I was the one who wanted the annulment, that I'd admitted I could never have children and was setting him free to find happiness elsewhere. "He made it sound like you two had an agreement," Madison said, looking at me with genuine remorse. "Like you wanted him to be happy even if it meant leaving. I thought I was helping him escape an unhappy situation." "Did he ever mention plans to falsify medical records?" Eleanor asked. "Not directly, but I overheard a phone call once. He was talking to someone about changing paperwork, about making sure everything was documented correctly. He said something about necessary adjustments and how she'd never know the difference." Eleanor made careful notes. "Did you ever see money change hands? Large transfers or payments?" "He paid for my apartment, cash $50,000, so I wouldn't have to worry about rent while I was pregnant and preparing to be his wife." Madison's voice broke. "He called it a gift, but now I realize it was probably the same money he used for whatever else he was doing." After the deposition, Madison lingered. "I'm sorry," she said to me directly. "I know that doesn't change anything, but I'm sorry. He lied to me too." I surprised myself by believing her. "You're 24 years old and you believed a man who told you what you wanted to hear. That doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you human. What's going to happen to me? That's up to you. You can choose to keep working for James, keep believing his version of events, keep being complicit, or you can tell the truth and move forward with your life." She nodded slowly. "I already told the detective everything I know, and I quit Patterson Industries this morning." The criminal investigation concluded 3 weeks after my initial meeting with Detective Brennan. The prosecutor's office filed charges against James Patterson. 2 counts of fraud, 1 count of conspiracy to commit fraud, and 1 count of falsifying medical records. They also charged Linda Chen with fraud and conspiracy, though her cooperation earned her a plea deal with minimal prison time. Dr. Morrison wasn't charged. The investigation found he'd been unaware of his administrator's actions. He did lose his medical license for 6 months for failing to maintain proper security protocols for patient records. The day the charges were announced, I was in Eleanor's office reviewing settlement offers. James's lawyer had finally acknowledged that fighting was futile and had proposed a settlement. I would receive 40% of marital assets in exchange for dropping all defamation claims against James and his family. "Absolutely not," Eleanor said. "We're going to trial." "But if we go to trial, this could take years." "It won't. James can't afford years. His company is hemorrhaging value. His board is furious. His reputation is destroyed. He needs this to end quickly, which means he'll eventually give us what we want. We just have to wait him out." She was right. 2 weeks later, a new settlement offer arrived, 60% of marital assets, full assumption of all marital debts by James, public apology, and payment of all my legal fees. In exchange, I would drop the defamation suits against Patricia and others. I considered it for exactly 3 seconds. No, Eleanor raised an eyebrow. No? I don't want his apology. I want a full admission of what he did. I want him to state, on record, in court, that he falsified my medical records, that he planned to defraud me, and that every accusation he made against me was false. I want it in the public record, and I want 70% of assets. That's aggressive. He might refuse and take his chances at trial. Then we go to trial. I have time, I have evidence, and I have nothing left to lose. Eleanor smiled slowly. I love working with you. The final settlement came together, 3 days before the scheduled trial date. James would admit to fraud and falsification of records in open court. I would receive 70% of marital assets, including the house, full assumption of all debts by James, payment of all legal fees, and a structured settlement payment of $10,000 monthly for 5 years. In exchange, I would drop all defamation claims and agree not to speak publicly about the case. The non-disclosure clause is his lawyer's attempt to control the narrative, Eleanor explained, but it's meaningless. Everything is already public record. The news articles, the court documents, the criminal charges, it's all out there. You agreeing not to talk about it doesn't change what everyone already knows. The final hearing took place on a Thursday morning in October. The courtroom was packed with reporters, curious observers, and a few people I recognized from Patterson Industries. James sat at the defendant's table, looking diminished, his expensive suit unable to hide how much weight he'd lost. Judge Holloway reviewed the settlement terms, then looked at James. Mr. Patterson, do you agree to these terms? Yes, Your Honor. And do you admit to the facts as stated in the agreement, specifically that you paid Linda Chen $50,000 to falsify medical records belonging to your wife, Vivian Patterson, with the intent to fraudulently obtain an annulment and deprive her of marital assets? James's jaw clenched. His lawyer whispered something to him. Finally, he spoke. Yes, Your Honor, I did those things. And do you acknowledge that all statements you made publicly claiming Mrs. Patterson had deceived you or defrauded you were false? Another pause. Another whispered consultation with his lawyer. Yes, Your Honor. Judge Holloway signed the settlement order. This divorce is granted. The terms of settlement are hereby incorporated into the final judgment. Court is adjourned. It was over. 7 years of marriage, 6 months of investigation, 3 months of legal warfare, over in less than 5 minutes of judicial review. Outside the courthouse, reporters surrounded me. Rachel stood at my side, having covered the hearing for the Tribune. Eleanor handled the questions professionally. Mrs. Patterson is satisfied with the outcome, Eleanor said. Justice has been served. She looks forward to moving on with her life. I said nothing. There was nothing to say. The evidence had spoken for itself. That evening, I sat in my small apartment, soon to be replaced by the house James and I had shared, which was now legally mine, and thought about everything that had led to this moment. The night I'd found the receipt, the conversation with Madison in the pharmacy parking lot, the hours spent organizing evidence, making copies, planning every step. People would probably call me cold or calculating. Maybe I was, but I'd learned something important. Being emotional doesn't mean being stupid. I'd felt every moment of betrayal, every sting of humiliation, every fear about my future. I'd just chosen to use those feelings as fuel instead of letting them consume me. My phone buzzed. A text from Rachel. Drinks to celebrate? I typed back, absolutely. At the bar, Rachel raised her glass, to the most satisfying takedown I've ever witnessed. It wasn't a takedown, I corrected. It was accountability. Even better. We clinked glasses. So what's next for you? I'm going back to work, maybe take that management position I was offered last year. Buy some new furniture for the house. Figure out what my life looks like without constantly preparing for legal battles. Sounds peaceful. Peaceful, I repeated, testing the word. Yeah, that sounds good. The criminal trial for James began 2 months later. I wasn't required to testify. The evidence was so overwhelming that my presence wasn't necessary. Linda Chen testified about the payment and the falsification. Financial experts traced the money. James's own recorded words played in court. He was convicted on all counts. The judge sentenced him to 3 years in prison, with possibility of parole after 18 months. Patterson Industries Board forced him to resign. The company eventually recovered, but James's name was removed from everything. The building, the letterhead, the promotional materials. It was like he'd never existed. Madison had her baby in April. A girl. I sent flowers to the hospital, unsigned, with a card that said simply, "Best wishes for your future." I meant it. She'd been a pawn in James's game, just like I had been. The difference was she'd recognized it and gotten out. Patricia never apologized. She gave one final interview, insisting her son had been railroaded by a corrupt system and a vindictive ex-wife. Eleanor sent her a cease and desist letter, and that was the last I heard from the Patterson family. I stayed in Seattle, kept my job, made new friends, and reconnected with old ones who'd drifted away during my marriage. I dated occasionally, but nothing serious. I wasn't ready for serious, and I was okay with that. The house became mine in every sense. I repainted the bedroom. James had insisted on grey. I chose a warm cream colour. I replaced the furniture, donated his books, turned his home office into a craft room I never actually used but liked having anyway. Every change was a small victory, a reclaiming of space that had felt like a museum to his ego. One afternoon, about 8 months after the divorce was finalized, I was reorganizing the kitchen when I found something I'd forgotten about, a small wooden box shoved in the back of the pantry. Inside were photographs from our wedding, cards from friends, a dried flower from my bouquet, evidence of a beginning that had curdled into something ugly. I almost threw it all away. Then I stopped myself. These weren't James's memories, they were mine. That young woman in the white dress had been hopeful and genuine. She'd believed in partnership and trust. The fact that James had betrayed those things didn't make her foolish. It made him faithless. I kept the box but moved it to the attic. Not forgotten, but not prominently displayed. Part of my history, not my present. Eleanor called me in September with unexpected news. Patricia Patterson is filing for bankruptcy. Apparently, she'd been financing James's legal defense, and the legal bills broke her. She's selling the family estate. That's unfortunate, I said, and meant it. I'd never wanted to destroy Patricia. I just wanted her to stop attacking me. There's more. She's claiming you somehow caused her financial ruin and is threatening another defamation suit against you. I sighed. Of course she is. Don't worry, I sent her lawyer copies of all the documentation showing she chose to pay James's legal bills. No one forced her. She made a financial decision that didn't pan out. That's not your responsibility. Eleanor paused. Though I have to admit there's a certain poetic justice to it all. I'm not celebrating someone's financial collapse, Eleanor. I know you're not. That's why you're the good guy in this story. Work became my focus. The management position I'd accepted came with new challenges, overseeing a team of analysts, negotiating with pharmaceutical companies, ensuring contract compliance across multiple departments. It was demanding and consuming, which was exactly what I needed. My team respected me. They didn't know the details of my divorce, just the broad strokes that had been in the news. One of my analysts, a sharp woman named Jennifer, asked me about it once over coffee. I hope this isn't too personal, she said carefully, but I read about what your ex-husband did, the medical records fraud. How did you stay so calm through all of that? Who says I was calm? She smiled. Fair point. But you seem, I don't know, not bitter, A lot of people would be consumed by anger after something like that. I thought about how to answer honestly. I was angry, incredibly angry. But I learned something important. Anger without strategy is just noise. I couldn't control what James did or how other people judged me. I could only control how I responded. So I chose to respond methodically, with evidence and patience. That's impressive. It's survival. When someone tries to destroy you, you have two choices: fall apart or build yourself back up stronger. I chose the latter. Jennifer nodded slowly. I'm going through a divorce right now. Nothing as dramatic as yours, but it's still hard. My husband isn't fighting me, but his family is. They keep saying I'm breaking up the family, that I should try harder, that divorce is selfish. Is the marriage broken? Completely. We haven't been happy in years. Then you're not breaking up a family. You're leaving a situation that wasn't working. Their guilt is their problem, not yours. I met her eyes. Don't let other people's expectations trap you in a life that makes you miserable. She seemed to breathe easier. Thank you. I needed to hear that. These conversations became more common than I expected. Women at work, at the grocery store, at the gym. They'd recognize me from the news coverage and approach tentatively. Some wanted advice. Others just wanted to share their own stories of betrayal and survival. I became an accidental mentor to people navigating their own difficult divorces. Rachel wrote a follow-up article a year after the initial story broke. It focused on medical records fraud as a broader issue, how easy it was to falsify documents, how rarely perpetrators faced consequences, how women were disproportionately affected. She interviewed me for it, carefully staying within the bounds of what I could legally discuss. Do you have any regrets about how you handled the situation? She asked during the interview. Only that I didn't trust my instincts sooner. I knew something was wrong for months before I started investigating. I kept making excuses for James, giving him the benefit of the doubt. If I'd acted on my suspicions earlier, I could have saved myself months of anxiety. What would you say to other women who suspect their partners are being dishonest? Trust yourself. If something feels wrong, investigate. Don't accept vague explanations or deflections. You have the right to verify information that affects your life. And if you find evidence of betrayal or fraud, document everything before confronting anyone. Evidence is your protection. The article won a Regional Journalism Award. Rachel dedicated it to the women who refused to be erased. I started volunteering at a legal aid clinic, helping women navigate divorce proceedings. Most couldn't afford lawyers like Eleanor Vance. They needed someone who understood the system, who could help them organize documents and understand their options. I wasn't a lawyer, but my experience had taught me plenty about evidence gathering and legal procedure. One woman, Anna, came to the clinic with a story eerily similar to mine. Her husband had claimed she'd hidden a medical condition to trap him into marriage. He was using it to avoid paying support for their 2 children. I don't know how to prove I didn't lie, she said, crying in the clinic's small conference room. He keeps saying I knew I had endometriosis before we got married and never told him. But I was diagnosed after we had our 2nd child. I have medical records, but his lawyer says they could have been falsified. Then we get the original records directly from the hospital, I told her. We request them with you present, with a witness, so there's no question about their authenticity. We get affidavits from your doctors confirming the diagnosis dates. We build an evidence trail that's impossible to dispute. Her eyes widened. We can do that. We can absolutely do that. Your husband is banking on you not knowing how to fight back. We're going to show him he miscalculated. Helping Anna felt like completing a circuit. James had tried to weaponize medical records against me, and I'd learned how to defend against that weapon. Now I could teach others. The legal system was complicated and intimidating, designed in ways that often favored whoever could afford the best representation. But knowledge was equalizing. Information was power. Anna's case took 4 months to resolve. When the judge ruled in her favor, Granting her full custody and substantial support, she hugged me in the courthouse hallway. "You saved my life," she said. "You saved your own life. I just showed you which tools to use." These small victories accumulated. Women who'd been told they were crazy or vindictive or gold diggers learned they had rights and options. They learned to document, to verify, to stand firm. Some cases ended in settlement. Others went to trial. A few ended with criminal charges against abusive or fraudulent spouses. I wasn't a hero. I was just someone who'd survived a specific kind of betrayal and learned how to help others survive similar situations. James was released from prison after serving 19 months. I learned about it from a news alert on my phone. The article included a statement from his lawyer. "Mr. Patterson has served his time and paid his debt to society. He's focused on rebuilding his life and career." I wondered what that life looked like now. No company, no reputation. A criminal record. Madison and their daughter somewhere, living their own lives apart from him. His mother bankrupt. His friends mostly disappeared. Fair-weather supporters who'd vanished when his conviction became final. Part of me felt satisfied. A smaller part, the part I didn't like to acknowledge, felt something almost like pity. He'd destroyed everything chasing some fantasy of consequence-free betrayal. And now he had nothing. But then I remembered Madison in that pharmacy parking lot, terrified and pregnant and believing his lies. I remembered the modified medical records, the calculated cruelty of trying to label me as a fraud. I remembered Patricia's venomous interviews, the social media attacks, the deliberate attempts to destroy my reputation. The pity evaporated. He'd earned every consequence. I never saw James again after the courthouse. Seattle was large enough that our paths didn't cross. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he'd moved to Portland, taken some consulting position with a startup, was trying to rebuild under a lower profile. I hoped he'd learned something, but I didn't really care either way. He was no longer my problem. The second anniversary of my divorce arrived on a Tuesday. I marked it by doing absolutely nothing special. Went to work, had lunch with colleagues, came home to my quiet house. No celebration, no mourning. Just another day in a life that had become genuinely mine. Rachel came over that evening with wine and takeout. 2 years, she said, raising her glass. How does it feel? Normal, which is exactly what I wanted. No regrets. About divorcing James? None. About the years I spent married to him? I considered the question seriously. Some. I wish I'd recognized who he really was sooner. But I learned things about myself through that marriage and divorce. I learned I'm stronger than I thought. I learned how to fight effectively. I learned the importance of documentation and patience. You learned you're terrifying when someone crosses you, Rachel added, grinning. That too. We ate Thai food and watched a documentary about art forgery. Normal friend things, normal evening. The kind of evening that would have been impossible 2 years ago, when my life was consumed by legal strategy and evidence gathering. At some point during the documentary, Rachel said, "You know what's funny? James probably still thinks he was the victim, that you somehow trapped him or manipulated the situation. Men like that never actually accept responsibility." Probably, but his opinion stopped mattering to me the moment I filed for divorce. When did you know you'd win? Like, really know? The moment I found out about Linda Chen's cooperation with the police. Before that, I was confident but cautious. Once I knew she was testifying, I knew he had no viable defense. You can't argue with documented bank transfers and recorded confessions. Rachel nodded thoughtfully. I've covered a lot of court cases. Most don't end with this kind of clear victory for the wronged party. Usually it's complicated. Both sides share blame, or there's not enough evidence, or money tips the scales. Your case was different. Because James was sloppy, he assumed I'd never fight back, so he didn't bother covering his tracks properly. He underestimated me at every turn. Classic hubris. Classic patriarchy. He'd been surrounded by people telling him he was brilliant and special his entire life. His mother, his friends, business magazines, everyone reinforced this narrative that he was exceptional. So when I challenged that narrative with evidence of fraud and betrayal, he couldn't process it. In his mind, he was entitled to cheat, entitled to lie, entitled to restructure reality to suit his preferences. And then reality hit back. Hard. The documentary ended. Rachel left around 10, and I cleaned up the takeout containers, washed the wine glasses, reset the living room to its usual order. Small domestic tasks that felt grounding and satisfying. Before bed, I checked my email and found a message from Jennifer, my colleague who'd asked for divorce advice. The subject line read, "It's done." Her email was brief. "Divorce finalized today. Ex-husband's family still angry, but I don't care anymore. I'm free. Thank you for showing me it was possible to stand firm and come out the other side intact. I bought a new apartment and adopted a cat. Starting over feels good. Jay." I smiled and typed back, "Congratulations. Enjoy your freedom and your cat. You earned both." These messages came regularly now. Women I'd helped at the legal clinic, women who'd read Rachel's articles, even a few who'd just found my story inspiring. They'd reach out to say they'd left abusive relationships, or fought for fair settlements, or stood up to families who'd tried to shame them into staying in broken marriages. I never sought this role, accidental advocate for women navigating divorce. But I'd learned that sometimes the most meaningful work comes from surviving something terrible and then helping others survive it too. Sleep came easily that night. No nightmares about courtrooms or confrontations. No anxiety about James finding new ways to attack me. Just peaceful, dreamless sleep in a house that was wholly mine. The next morning, I drove to work through Seattle's autumn rain, listening to a podcast about contract law. Traffic was manageable. My coffee was hot. The day stretched ahead, with meetings and deadlines, and normal professional challenges. At my desk, I reviewed the quarterly reports, prepared notes for an afternoon presentation, responded to emails about upcoming contract renewals. Ordinary work, the kind I'd been doing for years, but now it felt different, lighter. I wasn't carrying the weight of secrets or impending confrontation. I was just doing my job, living my life, existing in a reality I'd fought to reclaim. During lunch, I met a friend from college who'd moved to Seattle recently. We talked about her new job, her kids, her husband's midlife crisis, panic about turning 40. Normal conversation, normal friendship. "You seem really good," she observed. "Happy. Different from when I saw you a few years ago." "I feel different, clearer about who I am and what I want." "The divorce changed you." "The divorce revealed me," I corrected. "I was always this person. I just didn't know it until I had to fight for my own survival." She nodded, understanding. Sometimes it takes a crisis to discover what we're capable of. Sometimes it takes someone betraying you to learn the value of trusting yourself. That afternoon, Eleanor called with a final update about the case. "Patricia's defamation suit against you was dismissed with prejudice. The judge called it frivolous and awarded you legal fees. She owes you $42,000. Will she pay?" "Eventually. We'll garnish her wages if necessary. But yes, she'll pay." "I don't need the money, Eleanor. Can we set up something where it goes directly to the legal aid clinic?" There was a pause. "You want to donate your settlement to help other women with their legal cases?" "Yes." "You're a better person than I am," Eleanor said, but she sounded pleased. "I'll set it up. The clinic will be thrilled." It's just money. And money spent helping people escape bad situations is money well spent. After we hung up, I sat at my desk thinking about that young woman in the pharmacy parking lot 2 years ago. The one who'd found a receipt and started asking questions. She'd been scared and hurt and uncertain about what to do next. But she'd also been smart enough to start documenting, brave enough to keep investigating, and strong enough to see it through to the end. I was proud of her. I was proud of me. The afternoon presentation went well. My team had prepared thoroughly, and the client signed a 3-year renewal worth millions. My boss congratulated everyone, promised bonuses, talked about expansion opportunities. Normal corporate success, earned through competence and professionalism. As I packed up my laptop that evening, Jennifer stopped by my office. "Can I ask you something personal?" "Of course." "Do you ever worry about trusting someone again? Like, after what James did, how do you imagine ever believing another person won't betray you?" It was a fair question, one I'd asked myself many times. I think trust has to be earned gradually through consistent behavior over time. I don't think I'll ever again give someone complete trust without verification. That's not cynicism, it's wisdom. Trust but verify, as they say. Does that mean you'll never get married again? I honestly don't know. Maybe. Maybe not. What I do know is that I'll never again ignore warning signs or make excuses for behavior that doesn't align with someone's words. I'll never again prioritize someone else's comfort over my own clarity. Jennifer smiled. That sounds healthy. It's survival. You learn to recognize patterns, to trust your instincts, to require accountability. Those aren't relationship destroyers, they're relationship protectors. She thanked me and left, and I finished packing up. The office slowly emptied as people headed home to families, to partners, to whatever evening plans awaited them. I headed home to my quiet house, my space, my peace. Dinner was simple: pasta with vegetables, a glass of wine, a book I'd been meaning to finish for months. The kind of evening James would have called boring. He'd always needed stimulation, excitement, novelty. I'd learned to appreciate stillness. Later, scrolling through news on my phone, I saw an article about Patterson Industries. The company had recovered impressively under new leadership, rebranded slightly, and just announced record profits. James's name appeared nowhere in the article, except in a brief historical note. Founded in 2015 by James Patterson, who stepped down in 2023 following legal issues. Legal issues, such a sanitized phrase for fraud and betrayal and falsified medical records. But that was how history worked. The sharp edges softened over time, the details faded, and eventually you became a footnote in someone else's success story. I was okay with that. I didn't need James to be remembered as a villain. I just needed to be remembered, by myself, as someone who'd fought back and won. The rain picked up outside, tapping against the windows in that particular Seattle rhythm that sounds like persistence. I closed my book, turned off the lights, and headed upstairs to bed. Tomorrow would bring more work, more meetings, more ordinary challenges. Maybe another woman at the legal clinic needing help. Maybe another colleague asking advice. Maybe just another normal day in a life I'd rebuilt from evidence and determination. Either way, I'd face it the same way I'd faced everything since that morning in the pharmacy parking lot, with clear eyes, careful documentation, and absolute certainty in my own worth. James had tried to erase me from our shared narrative. Instead, I'd written my own story, one where the underestimated wife became the woman who refused to disappear. And that, I thought as sleep pulled me under, was the best revenge of all. Not his suffering, not his imprisonment or bankruptcy or humiliation. My survival, my clarity, my absolute refusal to let his betrayal define me. I'd won not because I'd destroyed him, but because I'd protected myself. I'd gathered evidence when I could have fallen apart. I'd built a case when I could have accepted his narrative. I'd stood firm when everyone expected me to break. The girl who'd married James Patterson 7 years ago had believed in fairy tales and happy endings. The woman who'd divorced him understood something more valuable, that you could survive betrayal, document fraud, demand accountability, and build a better life from the wreckage of someone else's cruelty. That was the story. Not a revenge tale, but a survival manual. And I was still writing it, one careful day at a time.